Welcome to this week's episode of my new series, Dildos and Dislocations, when I bring you everything you could possibly want to know about the intersection of disability and sexuality, plus a whole lot that you'd really rather not know about both. And or me. Speaking of which, I'm Rye. In case you're new here, welcome to my studio apartment. I've redone this so many times, mainly because this is the first week that I have an audience. She's in the background over there plucking her eyebrows, pretending like she's not listening to everything I say. My girlfriend Ryan is present in the building and is my peanut gallery. Aren't you, darling? She's just giggling over there on the couch. And
I'm not here.
She's not here in my very small apartment with 2 doors. So I just got back from taking said girlfriend on our very first real date. So I was...
I said you.
Ignore the peanut gallery. I was concerned about this week because those of you who may have not been present on my page this week, said girlfriend surprised me 10 days early flying across the country, which was the best surprise I think that I've ever experienced. But good Lord have mercy, I forgot about this week's episode. That's all right, because when in doubt, I tend to rely on places of honesty. So I thought, you know what? Instead of being super by the book educational this week, as if I know how to be by the book educational about anything, I decided to tell a bit about my own experience with my disabilities. So, disability and sexuality. Let's throw that in there. So a short recap for those of you who only tune in for this particular series. I don't know if those of you exist or if it's just my friends and family members, but either way, short recap about myself. I am a wheelchair user. My disability is called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It is a collagen disorder that affects all of the collagen in my body. That makes sense. Genetic collagen disorder, which means basically all the glue that holds me together is super stretchy. My joints are very flexible, very hypermobile, prone to dislocations, a lot of flexibility and stretchiness in my organs. Affects basically every single aspect of every single thing I do in my everyday life. But because of this, I was born with this disorder. But as I got older and my collagen kind of got more flexible, or just, life happens, I walk more, my hips get looser, became more reliant on a wheelchair, etc. What I'm trying to say is I lived basically the first 20 years of my life with an invisible disability, and then quickly my disability became very visible. And this happened all in my early to mid 20s, which coincided with a lot of, sex stuff. So I got a very interesting, kind of unique experience that was just, experiencing the dating pool, what it was like to be a sexually active human being with an invisible disability versus a visible disability. During all this time, I dated, I have always been an open queer woman, so dated across the spectrum. I've dated in-person, online dating, long distance, you name it, with all the genders that could possibly exist. And so I thought that today would be kind of a cool, peek into that experience just for me personally, to talk about what I learned from that and what kind of came out of that experience, what I took away from it, and hopefully maybe one or two of you will relate or take something away from this episode, or if not, you will at least find some of this fascinating. That's all I can hope to bring to the table. I forgot to talk about this week's sponsors, aka we got a new picture on the wall. For those of you that don't know, I was actually married to a man. Very, very, very good man. And we had a lovely wedding that I designed back in my past life. Anyways, these were the centers of the table centers, English. Basically, I collect quotes and I put a whole bunch on the walls, but this is a Michael Faudet quote that has always rang true for me. You can never laugh too much or have too many orgasms. So that's up there today. And then today's drink, which is this very beautiful color. We have a hard kombucha by Strange Beast Ginger Lemon Hibiscus that was put out actually by Sierra Nevada. I am a fan. All right. So, I brought my notes that you guys know I refer to just so readily and use so often. But I think that the very first part is quite important, which is, despite popular belief, disabled people have sex. I'm gonna say it again. Disabled people have sex. Despite what media likes to portray, despite what our healthcare system likes to portray, to those of us in school for healthcare or those of us actually experiencing those disabilities, it is true. Most, if not all, disabled human beings are, in fact, sexually active, if not just sexual people. I'll come to that from someone with an invisible disability. The first thing I have written under here, which I think is very pertinent to the subject, is, again, those of you who do not know, I'm a registered nurse. I have practiced at bedside, mostly in emergency medicine, for over 10 years. And in my nursing school classes, we never spoke about sexuality in relation to disability or health issues. Sexuality was a very short piece of the lesson, mainly, hey, these are the STDs that your patients can contract. Here's how you treat them. Not, here's how you speak to your patient about gender dysmorphia. Here's how you speak to your patient about regaining a sexually active lifestyle post major trauma, post disability, post degenerative disability, post health issue. This was not something that was covered. Those of you who have heard me speak, listen to my podcasts, you may have heard this story before, but I will use it again because it just kind of drives that point home. I was working as a case manager in a hospital setting, and I was approached by some residents or student doctors about a certain patient who had a degenerative muscular disorder, who was cared for by her husband of 35 plus years, very diligent, very loving partner. And they came to me. This patient was completely bedbound at this point, totally cognizant, able to speak, able to conversate with you, but just unable to move from about chest down, and was a total care patient for her husband. And they came to me because they found a lab test that was indicative of some sort of sexual activity. And they came to me with concerns saying, hey, we think that this patient is being sexually abused. And I was a bit taken aback. I said, I've seen this patient, I've spoken to her, I've spoken to her family. What makes you think that? And they're like, well, did you see this lab value? Like, have you seen her? She's bedbound. There's no way she could possibly be sexually active. And it took me a second. I had to take a beat because I wanted to. No. I looked at him and I said, okay, have you spoken to the patient? He said, well, we wanted to come and talk to you first. This is a sensitive matter. I said, okay. As her acting medical practitioner, have you spoken to this patient? Well, her husband was in the room. Have you removed the husband from the room and said, hey, just want to reach out, make sure everything's kosher. Are you currently sexually active? Because that isn't healthcare practitioners, a perfectly okay thing to ask someone because it's pertinent to their medical care. They said no, looked very sheepish. I said, okay, well, I'm going to need you to go back in that room. I'm going to need you to either remove the husband from the room, however you feel comfortable having this conversation. I'm going to need you to ask that patient to her face, ma'am, are you sexually active? So they did. And shocker above shocker, she was. But that's the thing about our society and our healthcare system at this point in time, that disability, you know, we're diagnosed. We're told kind of, sort of, how to, you know, manage. And then sex, because it's not something that's gonna, you know, keep us alive, isn't something that's talked about. When I was diagnosed with a degenerative joint disorder, that was never something that was spoken about at all. Even to the point of, you know, the vulva, the vaginal canal, my pelvic floor, all of that is compiled of collagen. All of that is affected by Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It wasn't until I was, how old am I? 28 years old, with a major rectal prolapse requiring surgery, did I even think about, hey, my EDS is through and through. Maybe some issues in my past that I've had sexually could be related to my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. The more, you know, exploring I did on the internet, the more there was nothing there. It was fascinating. And so I'm a loudmouth, shocker among shockers, especially those of you who watch this regularly. I went to my friends with disabilities. I'm like, hey, friend with a spinal cord injury, were you know, was sex or sexuality, was that ever discussed with you post-injury? No. Almost every single person that I asked, especially like with traumatic spinal cord injuries, traumatic injury that involves, you know, the pelvic region, unless the patient themselves brought that up, it was not talked about. So back to my own experience, being someone that has dated both seemingly able-bodied and disabled, the differences in the dating world were so stark. I mean, it was fascinating. I mean, before, like, you know, I was on Tinder. I played that whole game, and you pick your best pictures, you go out there, you do the thing. Well, when I went back on Tinder as a wheelchair user, I'm painfully honest and painfully upfront. I tend to overshare with everyone I meet. So why would my dating profile be any different? I wanted to make sure that, you know, the person that I was conversating with knew, hey, I am disabled, I am in a wheelchair, there ain't no goddamn surprises here. This is a part of me, deal the fuck with it. The differences were insane. I got so few messages back, or the messages that I did get were people that very obviously did not look at my pictures, did not read my profile, nothing. I got into some interesting situations of people who it became quite apparent that they only were out with me because checking that little box next to have sex with a disabled chick was a thing. I got into instances with devotees, which, if you're not of this world, those are people who have a sexual attraction specifically to people with disabilities. This episode is going to have a very quick part 2 just because I'm running out of time, because I had to do some preface there. So, un momento, I will start part 2 shortly.